The phone rang at 6:14 in the morning. Tara already knew. She stood in the kitchen, hand pressed flat against the counter, and listened to her brother's voice break on the other end of the line. Daddy's gone. 2 words. That was all it took. She was still standing there when Cole walked in, poured himself coffee, and said without looking at her, "You're not going to the funeral. I don't want a scene." Tara didn't answer. She set the phone down, turned back to the window, and somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the silence, something shifted. What Cole Warren did not know, what none of them knew, was that Solomon Graham had spent the last 11 years preparing for exactly this moment. Before we go any further, if this story is already hitting different, drop your country and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell, every week we bring you stories just like this one. Don't miss what's coming next. There are men who build empires quietly. They don't announce it. They don't wear it on their wrists or park it in the driveway. They build in the early hours before the rest of the world wakes up, and they go to bed having added another brick to something most people will never see until it is already finished. Solomon Graham was that kind of man. Tara had grown up watching him from the doorway of his home office, a small room off the back of their house in southwest Atlanta, where he kept a single lamp burning past midnight and a coffee mug that was always half full and always cold. He never asked to be watched. He never performed. He simply worked steady and unhurried like a man who had made a private agreement with time and trusted that time would keep its end of the deal. She used to ask him what he was building. He would look up from his papers, push his reading glasses down his nose, and say the same thing every time. Something that will still be standing when I'm not. She hadn't understood it then. She was 9 years old. She thought he meant the house. Solomon Graham had started in minerals. Small contracts, resource surveys, geological consulting work that most people found too slow, too uncertain, too far from the kind of money that made noise. But Solomon was not interested in money that made noise. He was interested in money that compounded, that accumulated, that moved quietly beneath the surface of things like water, finding its level underground. By the time Tara was in high school, Graham Diamond Holdings had contracts across 3 continents. By the time she graduated college, it was a privately held conglomerate valued at just over $1 billion. By the time she stood at the altar and promised herself to Cole, Warren, her father's company, was worth 3 times that. And not a single person at that wedding knew. Not Cole's mother, Diane, who had smiled too widely during the reception and whispered to her sister that Tara seemed sweet but a little plain. Don't you think? Not Cole's colleagues who had spent the evening speculating about what Tara did for a living. Not Cole himself, who had leaned over during the first dance and said, "I'm going to take good care of you," as though that were a promise, as though she needed it. Solomon had been there. He had danced with his daughter and held her hand a beat too long before letting go, and then he had sat down at his table in the corner and watched. He watched the whole night. Tara had met Cole through a mutual friend 3 years before the wedding. He was charming in that particular way that reads as confidence when you first encounter it and reveals itself as something else entirely only after time has done its work. He was funny. He was handsome. He called when he said he would and showed up to things on time and made her feel for the first time in a long time like someone worth showing up for. Her father had met him exactly once before the engagement. One dinner. A quiet restaurant in Buckhead. Solomon had ordered fish and asked Cole 3 questions over the course of 2 hours. Tara had counted. Just 3. And Cole had answered all 3 the way people answer when they're performing, rather than responding smoothly, quickly, with a little too much eye contact. On the drive home, Solomon had said nothing for a long time. Then at a red light, he had turned to his daughter and said quietly, "That man needs money more than he needs you." Tara had felt something tighten in her chest. "Daddy, that's not fair." "Maybe not," Solomon had said. And then the light changed and he didn't bring it up again. She had wanted more than she had ever wanted most things to prove him wrong. She had wanted to believe that what she saw in Cole was real, that the warmth was genuine, that the steadiness would last, that a person could choose to become what love asked of them. 11 years of marriage had answered that question. 3 years before their wedding, Solomon had taken Tara to a building she had never been to, a quiet office suite on the 14th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. No signage on the door, just a number. Inside, a woman had stood to greet them. Tall, silver-streaked locks, tortoiseshell glasses. She had shaken Tara's hand with both of hers and said, "Your father has told me a great deal about you." Her name was Patricia Wells. Solomon had sat across from them both and explained in the same unhurried voice he used for everything exactly what he had built and exactly how he had protected it. The Solomon Trust. Irrevocable. Airtight. Tara's name on every document that mattered. "I want you to understand something," he had said, folding his hands on the table. "This is not about money. Money is just the form it takes. This is about making sure that no matter what happens, no matter who comes into your life or who leaves it, you are never without options. You are never without ground to stand on." Tara had nodded. She had not told Cole. Her father had asked her not to. "Don't let anyone love you for your money, baby girl," he had said on the elevator ride down. "Make them show you who they really are first." She had kept that secret for 11 years. She had watched. She had waited. And Cole Warren, without ever knowing he was being evaluated, without ever understanding that the woman sitting across from him at breakfast every morning was quietly documenting the results, had shown her exactly who he was. Her father had been right. She had just needed 11 years to be sure. The funeral was held on a Thursday, gray sky. November air that cut through fabric and settled into bone. The kind of morning that felt like the world itself had agreed to be somber, had pulled its colors back, and left only the bare trees and the cold light and the sound of shoes on wet grass. Tara arrived late, not because she had forgotten, not because she had lost track of time, but because Cole had stood in the doorway of their bedroom at 7:45 that morning and watched her get dressed without saying a single word, and something about that silence had made her move slower, deliberately slower, as though her body had decided without consulting her that she would not be rushed today. Not today. She had worn her mother's coat. Black wool, double-breasted, slightly too large across the shoulders. She had found it in the back of the guest closet 6 years ago and had never returned it to storage. There were days she wore it just to feel the weight of it. Today was one of those days. She parked at the edge of the cemetery and walked in alone. The service had already begun. She could see the gathering from a distance, maybe 60, 70 people clustered around the gravesite, heads bowed the pastor's voice, carrying low and even across the open ground. She recognized faces, her father's old colleagues, people who had known Solomon before he became what he became, people who had watched him build it all and said nothing and shown up now to witness the ending. Marcus was at the front. He stood very still, shoulders back, chin level, the way their father had always stood. Tara watched him from 20 feet away and felt something move through her chest that she could not name. He looked so much like Solomon, it was almost unbearable. She did not go to the front. She stood at the edge of the gathering behind the last row of chairs and let the pastor's words wash over her without trying to hold on to any of them. There were moments in grief where meaning collapsed, where language became just sound and sound became just weather, and she had learned over the years not to fight it. Some things you let pass through you. You just hold still and let them pass. She was still holding still when someone came to stand beside her. Patricia Wells did not announce herself. She simply appeared, tall, unhurried, silver-streaked locks, tucked beneath a black, wide-brimmed hat, and stood quietly at Tara's left shoulder for a long moment before speaking. "He loved you very much," Patricia said. Not loudly, just enough. Tara kept her eyes on the grave. "I know. He talked about you every time I saw him. Every single time." Patricia paused. "He wasn't a man who talked much, but he talked about you." Tara pressed her lips together. Said nothing. They stood that way for another minute, two women in black coats at the edge of a cemetery in November, watching the last chapter of Solomon Graham close. Then Patricia reached into the inside pocket of her coat and produced a small envelope. Cream-colored, sealed. Tara's name written on the front in her father's handwriting, that careful, deliberate print. He had always used each letter given its full space. "He asked me to give you this the day he passed," Patricia said. "Not before, the day of." Tara looked down at the envelope. She did not take it immediately. She stood very still, the way you stand when you know that the thing in front of you is the kind of thing that divides your life into before and after. Then she reached out and took it. Patricia gave her shoulder one single firm press, the kind that says everything and asks for nothing in return, and then she was gone, moving quietly back through the gathered mourners, unhurried, as though she had simply stepped out for a moment and was now returning to wherever she had been. Tara read the letter in her car. She had waited until the service was over, until she had watched her brother accept the condolences of 60 people with the same still composure their father had passed down, like a piece of furniture, solid, unmistakable, built to last. She had waited until the last car had pulled away from the cemetery and the grounds crew had begun their quiet work and the gray sky had started to flatten toward noon. Then she had walked back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and opened the envelope. Her father's handwriting, 4 paragraphs, no date. She read it once, then she read it again. "The trust is now yours, all of it. Patricia has everything she needs. Every document, every account, every certificate. 11 years of preparation. There is nothing they can take, nothing they can contest, nothing that was ever theirs to begin with. I watched that man for 3 years before I finished the final paperwork. I needed to be sure. I am sure. Don't rush. Don't react. Don't explain yourself to people who never deserved an explanation. Just watch them show you who they are. And then, when you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready, let Patricia do what I paid her to do. I love you, baby girl. I have loved you since before you had a name. Go home, make dinner, smile at the right moments. And when the time comes, be very, very quiet, because the quiet ones always win. Tara folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, pressed the envelope flat against her palm for a moment, just a moment, then tucked it into the inside pocket of her mother's coat, directly over her heart. She sat in the parking lot for 3 more minutes. Then she started the car, pulled out onto the road, and drove home to make dinner for a man who had absolutely no idea that his world had just ended. Cole Warren had never once asked Tara how she was doing after her father died. Not that evening. Not the next morning. Not in the days that followed when she moved through the house with that particular careful quietness of a person carrying something heavy in a space where no one had offered to help. He had not asked because it had not occurred to him to ask. And it had not occurred to him to ask because Tara had come to understand Cole Warren was a man who only registered pain when it was his own. She had known this for years. She had simply not allowed herself to name it until now. The dinner that night was quiet. Tara had made baked salmon roasted sweet potatoes, a simple green salad, with the lemon dressing Cole liked. She had set the table the way she always set at placemats, a straight glasses at the right napkins folded once. She had done all of this on the same day she had buried her father and read his final letter in a cemetery parking lot, and she had done it without a word of complaint, without a single visible tremor, because somewhere between the drive home and the moment she walked through the front door, she had made a decision so quiet it barely made a sound. She was going to watch. Just watch. Exactly as Solomon had asked. Cole came downstairs in gym clothes, dropped his phone on the counter, and sat down without acknowledging the food or the table or the woman who had prepared it. He scrolled for a moment, then picked up his fork. "Diane's coming for dinner Sunday," he said, not a question. "Okay," Tara said. "She wants to talk about the holidays." He speared a piece of salmon. "I told her we'd probably do Christmas at her place this year." Tara poured water into her glass. "You didn't ask me." "It's just dinner, Tara." She said nothing. She picked up her fork and ate and let the silence settle between them like something that had been there so long it had started to take up permanent residence. Sunday came the way Sundays always came in that house with Diane Warren's car in the driveway by 5 o'clock, and the particular energy Diane brought with her, which was the energy of a woman who had decided long ago that every room she entered was a room that had been waiting for her. She was 63 years old and moved like someone 20 years younger, quick, deliberate, with a habit of touching things that weren't hers. She would pick up a vase and turn it over to check the mark on the bottom. She would open a kitchen cabinet and rearrange 2 items with a small, satisfied hum. She did these things without malice, Tara had always told herself. She did them simply because she could not stop herself from rearranging the world into an order that made more sense to her. Tonight she arrived with a bottle of red wine and a comment about Tara's hair within the first 4 minutes. "You look tired, sweetheart," Diane said, handing Cole the wine without looking at him. "Have you been sleeping?" "I'm fine," Tara said. "Of course you are." Diane settled herself at the head of the kitchen island. Cole's mother had a way of always finding the head of things, and watched Tara plate the food. "Cole tells me you went to the funeral. I thought you two had decided it was better not to." "Cole decided," Tara said evenly. "I went." A brief pause. Diane glanced at her son. Cole kept his eyes on his phone. "Well," Diane said, smoothing her blazer, "I hope it gave you some closure." Tara set a plate in front of her and said nothing. It was over dessert that Diane made her mistake. They were midway through a conversation about the holidays, Christmas at Diane's New Year's, with Cole's colleagues a ski trip in January that Tara had not been consulted about, when Diane reached for her wine glass and said in the casual tone of a woman who had forgotten she was performing, "Cole, did you end up sorting out that thing with the Riverside booking? Vanessa said you'd left it to the last minute again?" The table went very still. Not loudly, just still. The way air goes still in the moment before weather changes. Cole's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mom, what?" Diane looked up. Then, registering something in her son's face, she set her glass down and said too smoothly, too quickly, "I just mean the hotel for the conference. Vanessa from your office mentioned it at the O." "It's handled?" Cole said flatly. Diane pressed her lips together and reached for her fork. Tara had not moved. She sat with her hands in her lap and her expression perfectly composed and her eyes on the middle distance, and she thought Vanessa from your office. She thought about the Riverside Hotel which she had looked up 3 weeks ago, when she found the reservation confirmation in Cole's email, the one he had forgotten to delete. She thought about the weekend in question which had coincided with a sales conference Cole had mentioned once and never mentioned again. She had already known. She had known for 4 months. She had a photograph, 2 receipts, and a thread of deleted messages she had recovered from a cloud backup Cole did not know she could access. But hearing it said aloud by his mother at her own table over a dessert she had made with her own hands on the same week she had buried her father, something moved through Tara's chest that was not quite anger and not quite grief and not quite anything she had a clean word for. She picked up her fork. She finished her dessert. She waited until Diane had said her goodnights and Cole had walked his mother to her car and the house had gone quiet again before she went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and picked up her phone. Patricia answered on the second ring. "I'm ready to start," Tara said. A brief silence on the other end. Then Patricia's voice measured and warm. "Ready to start what exactly?" Tara stood at the bedroom window and looked out at the dark driveway where Diane's taillights had just disappeared around the corner. Her voice when it came was very quiet and very certain. "Everything," she said. Patricia Wells had not become the kind of lawyer she was by accident. She had spent 31 years in private practice trust estates, asset protection, the quiet architecture of wealth that most people never see and never need to see because it is working exactly the way it is supposed to work. She had represented families through divorces and deaths and disputes that turned brothers into strangers and parents into liabilities. She had seen money do things to people that nothing else could do, strip them down to their most essential selves, reveal the hunger beneath the manners, expose the calculations running quietly behind the smiles. She had worked with Solomon Graham for 11 years. In that time, she had come to understand that he was building something that was not just about money. It was about protection. It was about making sure that when the moment came, and Solomon had always believed the moment would come, his daughter would be standing on ground so solid that nothing and no one could move her from it. Now the moment had come. And Patricia Wells intended to make sure Solomon Graham's 11 years of preparation counted for every single thing he had intended it to count for. Tara requested 90 days. She had thought about the number carefully. Not 60 too rushed, too obvious. Not 120 too long, too much room for Cole to maneuver to lawyer up properly to start moving things he didn't legally own but might try to claim anyway. 90 days was the right number. Long enough to be thorough. Short enough that Cole would not take it seriously. And Cole did not take it seriously. He had come downstairs the morning after Tara made her request, the morning after she had sat across from him at the kitchen table and said in the same voice she used to discuss grocery lists that she needed 90 days before they engaged attorneys, and he had looked at her with an expression she recognized. It was the expression of a man who believes he has already won and is simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. 90 days, he had repeated as though testing the weight of the words. 90 days, Tara had said. He had shrugged. Fine. Then he had poured his coffee and gone upstairs to get dressed, and that had been that. No questions, no curiosity about why she wanted the time, what she intended to do with it, what might be moving beneath the surface of her request, like water finding its level underground. He assumed she was grieving. He assumed she was stalling because she was afraid. He assumed because Cole Warren had always assumed that the silence of the person across from him was the silence of someone with nothing to say. He had never once considered that it might be the silence of someone who was listening. Day 1. Tara began with the phone records. She had requested a full account history 6 weeks earlier, before Solomon died, before she had said the word everything to Patricia on the phone, and the documents had been sitting in a folder in her desk drawer waiting. She went through them on a Tuesday evening while Cole was at the gym cross-referencing dates and numbers against a calendar she had been keeping in a notes app on her phone since February. A separate phone. Purchased with cash from a pharmacy 2 blocks from the school where she taught. She was a 7th-grade English teacher who had spent 11 years making herself look like someone with nothing. She had always found it quietly useful that people saw exactly what they expected to see. Day 11. She found the messages. Not by accident, she had known they existed, had known approximately where they lived, and why Cole believed they were gone. He had deleted them from his primary device, cleared the thread, emptied the folder. What he had not done was disable the automatic cloud backup that Tara had set up 3 years ago, when he had complained about losing his contacts after a phone upgrade. She had set it up. She had written down the credentials in a small notebook she kept in her coat pocket. She had never mentioned it again. She recovered 47 messages spanning 14 months. She read them once thoroughly, and then she closed the app and sat very still for approximately 2 minutes. Then she forwarded everything to a secure email address Patricia had set up for exactly this purpose and deleted the sent record from her secondary device. The messages were thorough. They were specific. They included dates, locations, plans, a level of operational detail that suggested Cole had never once considered the possibility that anyone might be looking. There was a message from 9 months ago in which Cole had referred to Tara as the placeholder. There was one from 6 months ago in which Vanessa had asked when he was planning to handle it, and Cole had responded soon. She has nothing. It'll be clean. Tara had read that one twice. Then she had forwarded it with the others and gone downstairs to start dinner. Day 24. Patricia filed the preliminary paperwork to begin the formal activation of the Solomon Trust, a process that once initiated could not be stopped or contested by any party outside of Tara herself. The filing was quiet, procedural, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. It appeared in no public record. It triggered no notification. It simply began the way things that have been carefully prepared always begin, without announcement, without fanfare, without any indication to the people standing nearby that the ground beneath their feet had just shifted permanently. Day 47. Tara photographed the joint bank statements. She documented the 2 credit cards Cole had opened in the past 8 months without mentioning them, one of which showed a recurring charge to a hotel in Midtown that aligned precisely with the dates in the recovered messages. She noted the withdrawal patterns. She cross-referenced them against the household budget she had maintained in a shared spreadsheet that Cole had not looked at in over a year. She built a picture. Methodical, thorough, entirely invisible. Cole came home every evening to a clean house and a warm meal, and a wife who asked about his day and listened to his answers with an expression that he read as resignation, and that was in fact something else entirely. She was memorizing him. The way a surgeon memorizes an anatomy before making the first incision, not out of affection, not out of habit, but because precision requires knowledge, and knowledge requires patience, and patience had always been the thing Tara Graham did best. Day 61. Patricia called on a Wednesday morning. "The trust activation is complete," she said. "Everything is in place. We can move whenever you're ready." Tara was standing in the school parking lot, between classes, the November wind cutting through her jacket, students moving past her in both directions, without looking twice at the quiet teacher standing at the edge of the lot with her phone pressed to her ear. "Not yet," she said. "How much longer?" Tara watched a group of 7th graders cross the parking lot, laughing at something she couldn't hear, entirely unaware of, her entirely unaware of anything beyond the particular urgent smallness of being 13 years old. 29 more days, she said. "I want every single day he gave me." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with something in her voice that might have been admiration, "Your father would have loved this." Tara almost smiled. "I know," she said. And then the bell rang and she straightened her jacket and walked back inside to teach her afternoon classes, and nobody who passed her in the hallway that day, not a colleague, not a student, not the vice principal who stopped her to discuss a field trip permission slip, had any idea that the woman standing in front of them was 43 days away from inheriting $3 billion. She taught 4 more classes that afternoon. She graded papers until 6. She drove homemade dinner and set the table for 2. He thought 90 days was enough time to dismantle a marriage. He had no idea she was using every single one of them. There are things you know and things you feel. And sometimes, most of the time, if you are honest with yourself, the knowing and the feeling exist in completely separate rooms inside you, and you spend years moving between them without ever opening the door that connects the two. You know your marriage is broken. You know the man across from you at breakfast has been somewhere else for a long time. You know the warmth you remember from the beginning was not a lie exactly, but was not the whole truth either, was instead a kind of performance that both of you sustained, because sustaining it was easier than looking at what was underneath. You know all of this. And still somehow the feeling waits. It waits for a specific moment, a specific sentence, a specific word, in a specific message sent on a specific Tuesday in November, and then it arrives all at once, not gradually, not mercifully, but the way cold water arrives when someone pulls you under, total, immediate, and breathtaking in its completeness. For Tara Graham, the word was placeholder. She had read it on a Wednesday evening. Day 11 of the 90, Cole was at the gym. The house was quiet in that particular way. It was always quiet when he was gone. A different quality of quiet than when he was home cleaner somehow, as though the rooms themselves exhaled when he left. She had been sitting at the kitchen table with her secondary phone and the recovered messages working through them with the same methodical focus She brought to everything cataloging, noting, forwarding, and then she had reached the message from 9 months ago and the word had been there. Placeholder. She had read it. She had read it again. She had set the phone face down on the table and sat very still with her hands folded in her lap and looked at the middle distance for a long time. 11 years. She had cooked 11 years of dinners in that kitchen. She had graded 11 years of papers at that table. She had folded 11 years of laundry and maintained 11 years of household accounts and attended 11 years of work functions, on Cole's arm, smiling at the right moments, laughing at the right jokes, making herself small enough and pleasant enough and undemanding enough that no one would ever look too closely. 11 years. And the word he had chosen, the word that lived in his private mind, the word he had typed casually to another woman as though it were simply a category, a label, an administrative designation, was placeholder. Not wife, not partner, not even her name. Placeholder. As though she were a temporary file. Something you saved to a folder with the intention of replacing it later with the real thing. That night she did something she had not done since the morning Marcus had called to tell her Solomon was gone. She cried. Not dramatically. Not in the way crying looks in films. No gasping, no collapsing, no hands pressed to the face. She simply sat in the living room after Cole came home and went upstairs, sat in the dark on the sofa with her mother's coat across her lap, and let the tears come the way they had been waiting to come for a long time. Quietly, steadily, without asking permission. She cried for the marriage she had believed in longer than the evidence warranted. She cried for the version of Cole she had constructed in the early years, patient, deliberate work the way you construct anything you want badly enough, and for the slow, incremental process of watching that construction fail. She cried for the phone calls she had not made to her father when things were hard, because she had not wanted him to be right. She cried for the 11 years of dinners and the 11 years of folded laundry and the 11 years of smiling at the right moments. She cried for Solomon, who had known from a single dinner and had loved her enough to spend 11 years making sure that knowing would not matter. She cried for exactly 40 minutes. Then she stopped. She wiped her face with the edge of her mother's coat, stood up, turned the lamp on, and went upstairs to wash her face and go to bed. And in the morning she got dressed, picked up her bag, and decided with a clarity that felt less like a decision and more like something that had been waiting patiently for her to catch up to it, that the rest of this would be done in silence. The meeting with Patricia was on a Thursday. Tara arrived 7 minutes early and sat in the reception area of the quiet Midtown office suite, the same suite Solomon had brought her to 11 years ago. The same number on the unmarked door, the same unhurried atmosphere of a place that had no need to announce itself. And when Patricia came out to meet her, something in Patricia's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She had seen it before, Patricia had said once. That particular quality of stillness in a person who had finished grieving and was now simply ready. It was different from anger, different from hurt. It was something quieter and more permanent than either. "You look different," Patricia said, holding the office door open. "I feel different," Tara said. They sat across from each other at the conference table, the same table Tara noted where Solomon had explained everything 11 years ago, with his hands folded and his voice unhurried, and Tara laid out what she had. The phone records, the messages, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements, the GPS data, the cloud backup, the photograph she had taken of the joint account withdrawals, annotated in her careful handwriting with dates and corresponding entries from the recovered messages. Patricia went through each item without speaking. She turned pages. She made occasional small marks in the margin of her legal pad. She did not react, not to the messages, not to the receipts, not to the word placeholder, which appeared highlighted in yellow on page 7 of the printed thread. When she had finished, she set the documents down and looked at Tara over her tortoiseshell glasses. "This is thorough," she said. "I had time," Tara said. Patricia almost smiled. "We're ready to proceed whenever you give the word." "Not yet," Tara said. "There are 29 days left. I want to use them." Patricia nodded slowly. She understood. She had worked with Solomon Graham for 11 years. She understood that some things were not just about winning. They were about winning completely, about making sure that when it was over there was nothing left that could be questioned, nothing left that could be contested, nothing left that could be taken. "There's one more thing," Tara said. She reached into her bag and produced a single sheet of paper, a printed page from a property records database annotated in the same careful handwriting. She slid it across the table. Patricia looked at it. Then she looked up. "He's planning to sell the house," Tara said. "Yes," Patricia said, "he is. He doesn't know it belongs to the trust." "No," Patricia said, "he doesn't." A silence settled between them. Not an uncomfortable silence, but the kind that comes when two people are looking at the same thing and seeing it with complete clarity, and do not need to say anything beyond what has already been said. Then Tara picked up her bag and stood. "Let him sign it," she said. Patricia looked at her for a moment. Then she picked up her pen. "Let him sign it?" she repeated, writing it down. That evening, Tara's phone buzzed once on the drive home. A text from an unsaved number she recognized immediately. "Sis, you ready?" She stopped at a red light, looked at the message, thought about her brother's voice the morning Solomon died, the way it had broken on the other end of the line, and then within seconds, within the span of a single breath, gone quiet and steady again, the way their father's voice had always gone quiet and steady when things were hardest. Marcus Graham, 29 years old. Broad shoulders, warm brown eyes, close-cropped natural hair, quietly embedded for the past 3 years as Deputy Executive Officer of Graham Diamond Holdings, a position that appeared nowhere on any document Cole Warren had ever seen in a company whose name Cole Warren had never once thought to research. Tara typed back with one hand. Almost. The light changed. She drove home. She made dinner. She set the table for 2 and called Cole down when it was ready and sat across from him while he talked about a deal he was working on and a colleague who had irritated him and a restaurant he wanted to try in January. She listened. She nodded at the right moments. She refilled his water without being asked. She had cried exactly once, and then she had gotten dressed, picked up her bag, and decided the rest of it would be done in silence. Cole Warren had always believed that timing was everything. It was something he said often at work at dinner parties in the particular way men say things they have convinced themselves are wisdom, when what they are really describing is luck. Timing is everything. He had built his entire professional identity around the idea that he was a man who knew when to move, who read situations correctly, who understood better than the people around him exactly when the moment was right. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The idea to sell the house had come from his attorney. Derek Mills was 44 years old, wore pocket squares, and charged $420 an hour for advice that Cole received as though it were scripture. He had recommended the sale 3 weeks into the 90-day period in a meeting that Cole had attended with the particular energy of a man who has already decided he has won and is now simply enjoying the administrative confirmation of that fact. "Liquid assets are easier to divide," Derek had said, straightening his pocket square. "If you can get the house under contract before the formal proceedings begin, you control the narrative on valuation. She gets half of whatever it sells for. Clean. Simple." Cole had nodded slowly the way he nodded when he was performing thoughtfulness. "What if she contests it?" Derek had smiled. "She'd have to have grounds. Is the property in her name?" "Joint," Cole had said. "Then she has no more right to block the sale than you do. Get it listed. Move fast. By the time attorneys are formally engaged, it'll be under contract and she won't have leverage to slow it down." Cole had left that meeting feeling the way he always felt when he believed he had outmaneuvered someone. Light, satisfied. Faintly celebratory in the way of a man who has never seriously considered the possibility that the person he is outmaneuvering might be several steps ahead. The listing went up on a Friday. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, hardwood floors, throughout updated kitchen, asking price just under $800,000. The photographs were good. The agent was efficient. Cole had handled all of it without mentioning a word to Tara, not the listing, not the agent, not the asking price, not the open house scheduled for the following Sunday. Tara had found out through the property alert she had set up on her phone 6 weeks earlier. She had been in her classroom when the notification came through between 3rd and 4th period, standing at her desk with a stack of ungraded essays, and she had looked at the alert, looked at the listing price, looked at the photographs of the kitchen she had renovated 4 years ago with money from a trust account Cole did not know existed, and she had felt something move through her that was not quite amusement and not quite fury, but occupied the precise space between the two. She had forwarded the listing to Patricia with a single line, "He listed it." Patricia had responded 11 minutes later. "I know. I've been watching. Let him." What Cole did not know, what Derek Mills, despite his $420 an hour, had entirely failed to discover, was that the house at 1847 Wyndham Drive, Atlanta, Georgia, had not been purchased with joint marital funds. It had been purchased 6 years ago with a transfer from a subsidiary trust account, one of 3 such accounts Patricia had established under the Solomon Trust structure in the years before the wedding. The account appeared in no document Cole had ever seen. It appeared on no tax return he had ever filed. It had existed quietly and completely in the architecture of Solomon Graham's planning, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. The house belonged to the trust. Every brick, every hardwood plank, every cabinet in the kitchen Cole had photographed for the listing, Every square foot of the updated bathrooms he had described to his agent as a selling point. The contract Cole Warren was preparing to sign was a document that gave him the legal authority to sell something he had never owned. It was worth in the precise legal language Patricia would use when the moment came exactly nothing. He signed it on a Tuesday. Tara was at school. Cole sat at the kitchen island with Derek Mills on speaker, and the listing agent seated across from him and signed the purchase and sale agreement with the particular flourish of a man who believes he is being watched by history. He was being watched. Just not by history. Vanessa Holt had a habit of documenting things. It was not a calculated habit she was not, despite everything a strategic person. She simply liked to mark occasions, liked to record the moments that felt like turning points, the way people mark the walls of houses to track how tall their children are growing. She had been doing it for years long before she met Cole Warren, and she did it now. Without thinking, picked up her phone, flipped the camera, and recorded 47 seconds of Cole opening the bottle of champagne. She had brought the cork hitting the kitchen ceiling, both of them laughing at the sound of it. "To new beginnings," Cole had said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Vanessa had repeated. She had posted the video to her private account, the one with the setting she believed was restricted to close friends, with a caption that read simply, "He did it." She had not tagged a location. She had not tagged Cole. She had not mentioned the house or the contract or the sale. She had not needed to. Patricia Wells had 3 different ways of accessing information that people believed was private. She used the most straightforward one. The video was downloaded, timestamped, and added to the folder within the hour. The dinner that week was at Diane Warren's house. It was the kind of dinner Diane hosted with theatrical casualness, the good dishes out, the good wine, opened the table set as though company had arrived spontaneously, rather than by standing weekly invitation. She had made pot roast. She had made the potato gratin Cole liked. She had set 3 places at a table that seated 8, and when Tara arrived, she had looked at her with the particular expression she reserved for things she found slightly inconvenient and said, "Tara, you look thin. Are you eating?" "I'm eating fine," Tara said. Diane turned back to the kitchen. "Stress does that. Takes the weight right off." Cole poured himself wine and did not offer any to Tara. The dinner was the way their dinners always were, Cole and Diane running a conversation between themselves that Tara was technically present for but functionally excluded from moving from topic to topic, with the ease of people who have been talking to each other exclusively for so long they have forgotten how to include a third person naturally. Work, colleagues, a cousin's new baby, the holidays, a property development in Buckhead that Cole's firm was tangentially involved in, and then Diane, reaching for the breadbasket, said it the way she always said things that mattered, casually, lightly, as though she were commenting on the weather. Cole finally found someone who actually matches his level. She was talking to the breadbasket when she said it. She was not looking at Tara. She may not have intended it to land the way it landed, or she may have, because Diane Warren was not as careless as she performed. Either way it landed. Tara picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip and said nothing. What Diane Warren did not know was that the small digital recorder Tara had placed in the inside pocket of her coat, purchased at an electronics store on a Wednesday afternoon 4 weeks ago, cash no loyalty card had been running since she walked through the front door. Cole finally found someone who actually matches his level. Time-stamped, archived, forwarded to Patricia before Tara had finished her pot roast. That night driving home, Cole was in a good mood. He talked about the house sale, about the timeline, about how clean it was going to be. He talked about January, about a trip he and Vanessa were planning, about how he was thinking of moving to a new building downtown, something modern, something that felt like a fresh start. He talked the entire drive home. Tara drove and listened and did not say a single word. When they pulled into the driveway, Cole was still talking. He got out of the car still talking. He went inside still talking. Tara sat in the parked car for a moment after he went in. She thought about the contract. She thought about the video. She thought about Diane's voice saying Cole finally found someone who actually matches his level, and the small recorder in her coat pocket, and the folder on Patricia's secure server that was now, after 47 days of quiet and deliberate work, very, very full. She thought about the document Cole had signed that morning, the document that gave him legal authority over something he had never owned, the document that was worth exactly nothing. She sat in the dark driveway for 3 more minutes. Then she went inside, said goodnight to a man who did not look up from his phone, and went upstairs to sleep. The document had been witnessed, notarized, and signed, and it was worth exactly nothing. The dinner invitation came on a Wednesday. A text from Cole sent at 2:17 in the afternoon, while Tara was between classes, brief and declarative in the way all of Cole's communications had become over the past several weeks, stripped of pleasantry, stripped of any pretense that they were people who still spoke to each other with care. Family dinner Sunday. My mom's coming. Important. Tara had read it standing in the hallway outside her classroom, students moving past her in both directions. Someone's locker slamming shut at the far end of the corridor. She had read it twice. Then she had put her phone in her pocket and gone back inside to teach her fourth period class. She had not responded until that evening. I'll be there, she had written. Nothing more. She spent the days between Wednesday and Sunday the way she had spent most of the past 81 days, quietly, methodically, without any outward indication that anything was different. She taught her classes, she graded her papers. She made dinner on Thursday and Friday and did not make it on Saturday, because Cole was out, and she ate a bowl of soup alone at the kitchen table with a book open in front of her, and felt for the first time in a long time something that was almost peace. Almost. She called Patricia on Saturday morning. Sunday, she said, a pause. The dinner? Yes. He's going to make some kind of announcement. I want everything ready to move Monday morning. It's already ready, Patricia said, has been for 2 weeks. I know, Tara said. I just wanted to say it out loud. Another pause. Warmer this time. How are you? Patricia asked. It was not the kind of question Patricia asked often. She was a woman who dealt in documents and strategy, and the precise architecture of legal protection, not as a rule in the emotional texture of the people she represented. But she had known Tara since Tara was 23 years old. She had watched her grow into the kind of woman Solomon had always believed she would become, and sometimes at the end of a phone call she asked, I'm ready, Tara said. That's not what I asked. Tara was quiet for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, the November sky was pale and flat, the kind of sky that held its weather close and gave nothing away. I know, she said finally. I'm okay. I think I've been okay for a while. I just needed to let myself notice it. Patricia said nothing, but Tara could hear something in the silence, something that might from a woman less composed than Patricia Wells have been called tenderness. Monday morning? Patricia said. Monday morning. Tara confirmed. She hung up and finished her soup and read her book until the light outside went gray, and the kitchen grew quiet and still around her, and it occurred to her sitting there alone on a Saturday evening in a house that had never quite felt like hers that she was not afraid. She had expected fear, had prepared for it the way you prepare for weather you know is coming, but it had not arrived. What had arrived instead was something steadier and less dramatic, a kind of settled certainty the way ground feels underfoot when you have been walking long enough to trust it. She was not afraid. She was ready. Sunday came gray and cold. Diane arrived at 5 o'clock exactly, carrying a bottle of red wine and wearing the structured navy blazer she reserved for occasions she considered significant. She kissed Cole on the cheek and looked at Tara with the particular expression she had been wearing for most of the past 11 years, assessing, slightly pitying the expression of a woman who has decided she knows everything about you and has found you wanting. Tara, she said, you look well. Thank you, Tara said. Can I take your coat? She took Diane's coat. She hung it in the front closet. She went back to the kitchen and finished plating the food she had prepared, roast chicken, green beans, the wild rice Cole liked, and carried it to the table and set everything down, and sat in her usual chair and folded her hands in her lap and waited. Cole came to the table last. He sat at the head of it. He had always sat at the head of it, even in the early years, when they had both laughed about the pretension of it, back when there was still laughter, and he poured wine for himself and for his mother, and then set the bottle down, without pouring any for Tara, and if he noticed the omission, he gave no indication. He waited until they had been eating for approximately 10 minutes. Then he set his fork down, cleared his throat, and began. He had prepared something. Tara could tell by the way he held himself slightly straighter than usual, the particular posture of a man who has rehearsed, and by the way Diane had gone very still beside him, the way an audience goes still when they already know the ending of the performance and are simply waiting for it to arrive. I think we all know why we're here, Cole said. He looked at Tara when he said it. She looked back, said nothing. The 90 days are up Thursday, he continued. I've talked to Derek. We're ready to move forward. The house's under contract closing is scheduled for the 14th. The joint accounts will be frozen pending division. Derek has drafted a settlement proposal that I think is more than fair given. He paused, and in the pause there was something she recognized, the slight recalibration of a man choosing his words, carefully aware that the word he almost used was not the right one. Given the circumstances. Diane reached over and touched Cole's hand briefly. Supportive. Rehearsed. Cole continued. He talked about the settlement. He talked about the house proceeds. He talked about the joint accounts and the timeline and what he was prepared to offer in terms of spousal support, a number he delivered with the magnanimous air of a man giving a gift, a number that Tara registered and filed away and did not react to in any visible way. He talked for 6 minutes. Tara counted. When he finished, he picked up his fork again, the way you pick up a fork after completing a task, after crossing something off a list, and looked at her with an expression that was almost kind. The kindness of a man who believes he is being generous, who believes the person across from him has no option but to receive what he is offering. I think this is the cleanest way to handle it, he said, for both of us. The table was very quiet. Diane was watching Tara with the careful attention of someone expecting a reaction, tears perhaps, or protest, or the particular crumpling of a person who has just heard something they were not prepared for. Tara reached for her water glass, took a slow sip, set it down. Then she reached into the bag hanging on the back of her chair. She produced a single envelope, cream-colored. Her name was not on this one. It was addressed in Patricia's precise professional handwriting to Cole Warren with the firm's return address in the upper left corner. She had picked it up from Patricia's office on Friday afternoon. She set it on the table in front of Cole's plate. He looked at it, then at her. "What's this? You're being invited?" Tara said to a meeting. "Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Patricia Wells's office." A beat. "Who's Patricia Wells?" Cole asked. Tara picked up her fork. "My attorney," she said. She took a bite of her roast chicken, chewed slowly, swallowed. Cole was still looking at the envelope. Diane had gone very still beside him, the particular stillness of a woman who has just sensed for the first time that something is not going the way she expected it to go. "Your attorney," Cole repeated. Something had shifted slightly in his voice. Not much, just enough to notice. Tara said. She reached for the wine bottle and for the first time that evening poured herself a glass. Nobody spoke. She ate her dinner, she finished her wine. She folded her napkin when she was done and placed it beside her plate and pushed her chair back and stood. "Thank you for dinner," she said to no one in particular. She picked up her bag. She walked to the front closet and retrieved her coat, her mother's coat black wool, double-breasted slightly too large across the shoulders, and put it on and buttoned it and picked up her keys. Cole was still sitting at the table. The envelope was still in front of his plate. He had not opened it. "Tara," he said. His voice had a quality she had not heard in it before. Not quite uncertainty, something adjacent to it. She paused at the doorway of the dining room. She did not turn around. 9 o'clock, she said. "Don't be late." And then she walked out of the dining room and through the front door and down the front steps and got into her car and drove away. She left the envelope on the table. She left the half-finished wine. She left the roast chicken and the wild rice and the green beans she had prepared for people who did not deserve the preparation. She left it all exactly where it was, and she did not look back once. Nobody stopped her. Nobody knew they should have. Monday morning arrived the way important mornings always arrive, indistinguishable from any other. The same gray Atlanta sky, the same traffic on Peachtree, the same coffee shops opening their doors at 6:30, with the same unhurried routine of people who do not know that somewhere across the city something is about to happen that will divide at least 3 lives into before and after. Tara arrived at Patricia's office at 8:45. She wore a dark blazer over a cream blouse, her natural locks pulled back, simply no jewelry, except the small gold studs her father had given her for her 30th birthday. She looked to anyone who passed her in the lobby elevator like a woman on her way to a meeting, composed, unhurried, entirely unremarkable. Entirely. She sat in the conference room and drank the coffee. Patricia's assistant brought her and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline, the same skyline she had looked at from this building 11 years ago, when Solomon had brought her here the first time when she had been 23 years old and had not yet understood what she was being given, and she felt sitting there in the gray Monday morning quiet, something she recognized after a moment as gratitude. Not happiness, not triumph, not the hot bright thing that people call vindication, just gratitude, clean and simple and entirely her own. "Thank you, Daddy," she thought. "I've got it from here." Cole arrived at 9:04. He came in with Derek Mills beside him. Derek in his pocket square, Cole in the charcoal suit he wore when he wanted to feel powerful, and the energy he brought into the room was the energy of a man who has decided that whatever this is, it is a formality, a procedural step, something to be moved through efficiently so that the real business of his new life can begin. He looked at Tara when he came in. She looked back. She did not smile. She did not look away. He sat down across from her. Derek Mills arranged his papers. Cole poured himself water from the pitcher on the table. He glanced around the room, the clean lines of it, the tall windows, the absence of anything that announced itself too loudly, and something moved briefly across his face. A flicker of something he covered quickly. Not quite unease. The precursor to it. Patricia entered last. She came in the way she came into every room, unhurried, deliberate, as though the room had been waiting for her rather than the other way around. She set her files on the table. She sat. She opened her legal pad. She looked at Cole Warren over her tortoiseshell glasses with the particular expression of a woman who has been doing this for 31 years and has seen every version of the man sitting across from her and is not impressed by any of them. "Mr. Warren," she said. "Thank you for coming." "Let's just get through this," Cole said. Patricia looked at him for a moment. Then she opened her first file. She began with the house. She laid the trust documentation on the table, clean copies tabbed, organized with the precision of someone who had been preparing this particular presentation for 11 years, and walked Cole and Derek through the chain of title on 1847 Wyndham Drive, Atlanta, Georgia. The original purchase, the funding source, the subsidiary trust account, the legal structure that placed the property entirely and irrevocably within the Solomon Trust and therefore entirely and irrevocably outside the reach of any marital asset claim. Derek Mills stopped writing approximately 4 minutes in. He picked up the documents. He read. He set them down. He picked them up again. Cole watched his attorney's face. "What?" Cole said. Not a question. The word of a man who has felt the first tremor of something shifting beneath him and does not yet understand what is moving. "The house," Derek said carefully, "may not be." He stopped. Read another page. "The house is held in trust." "What does that mean?" Derek looked at him. "It means the sale contract is void." The room was very quiet. Cole turned to Patricia. "That's not possible. The property is in both our names. The property is titled jointly as a matter of record." Patricia said, "But it was purchased with funds from a subsidiary account of the Solomon Trust, established prior to your marriage under a legal structure that supersedes joint titling in the event of dissolution. The prenuptial agreement you signed in 2013, page 41, paragraph 7, subclause C, specifically addresses this scenario." She slid a copy of the prenup across the table, already open to the correct page. "Your signature is at the bottom." Cole looked at the page. He looked at his signature. He looked at Derek. Derek was reading paragraph 7, subclause C. He did not look up. Patricia moved to the accounts. She laid out the joint account documentation, the withdrawals Cole had made over the past 14 months, the credit cards opened without disclosure, the hotel charges, the transfers. She laid them out in chronological order with the recovered messages printed alongside them, each withdrawal matched to a corresponding entry, each entry time-stamped and sourced. Cole's jaw tightened. "Where did you get those?" "They were accessible," Patricia said simply and moved on. She presented the video next. 47 seconds. Cole and Vanessa with champagne, the cork hitting the ceiling, both of them laughing. "To new beginnings." She did not play it aloud. She simply placed the printed transcript on the table with the timestamp visible at the top and let Cole read it. She presented the recording from Diane's dinner table. Cole finally found someone who actually matches his level. Time-stamped, sourced, admissible. Derek Mills had stopped taking notes entirely. He was sitting very still with his hands flat on the table in front of him, and his face had the particular expression of a man who is performing rapid calculations and does not like any of the results he is arriving at. Then Patricia opened the second file. This one was thicker. Much thicker. She placed it on the table and let it sit for a moment without opening it, and in that moment, in the particular weight of that pause, something changed in the room. The air shifted. Cole felt it without understanding it, the way you feel weather changing before you can see it. Patricia opened the file. "I want to introduce you," she said, "to the Solomon Trust." She walked them through it, all of it. The structure, the history, the 11 years of preparation, the asset schedule, mining operations across 3 continents, the jewelry division, the subsidiary holdings, the investment portfolio, the real estate assets. She spoke in the measured, unhurried voice of a woman reading from a document she has read many times before, each figure given its full weight, each line item clear and unambiguous. When she reached the valuation, she paused. She looked at Cole Warren. Total assets under trust management. she said, as of the most recent independent valuation are assessed at $3.1 billion. She let the number settle. 100% of controlling interest transfers to Tara Graham Warren upon the death of Solomon Graham, which occurred November 4th of this year. The transfer is complete, irrevocable, and not subject to any marital asset claim under the terms of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in August of 2013. The room was completely silent. Cole had gone still in a way that was different from the stillness of composure. It was the stillness of a man whose body had registered something that his mind had not yet caught up to the particular freeze of a person standing at the edge of something they did not know was there. Derek Mills leaned over and said something very quietly into Cole's ear. Cole did not respond. He was looking at Tara. She looked back at him. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. Her expression was the expression she had worn for most of the past 11 years, composed, quiet, giving nothing away. The expression he had read for 11 years as the expression of a woman with nothing to say. He understood now what it actually was. The door opened. Everyone at the table looked up. A man came in, broad shoulders, warm brown eyes, close-cropped natural hair, medium brown skin, a crisp white dress shirt beneath a well-cut dark jacket. He moved with the unhurried ease of someone entirely at home in rooms like this one. He pulled out the chair at the end of the table and sat down without apology for the interruption, the way people sit down in rooms they own. He placed a business card on the table in front of Cole. Cole looked at it. Graham Diamond Holdings, Marcus Graham, Deputy Executive Officer. Cole looked up. The man looked back at him with warm brown eyes that were, Cole noticed, with a sensation he could not immediately name, almost identical to Tara's. "Mr. Warren," Marcus said, "I believe you know my sister." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Cole turned to Tara. She did not look away. She did not explain. She simply sat with her hands folded and her expression composed, and let him put it together himself, the 11 years, the dinners, the company name. He had never once thought to research the brother he had met twice at family gatherings and dismissed as unimportant, the quiet woman across from him who had spent 11 years being underestimated and had used every single year of it. Derek Mills gathered his papers. He did it slowly, with the careful movements of a man trying not to draw attention to the fact that he is leaving. He stacked his documents, he capped his pen. He slid his legal pad into his briefcase and closed the clasp and stood. "Cole," he said quietly, we need to talk before." "Sit down, Derek," Cole said. His voice was strange, flat. The voice of a man speaking from very far away. Derek sat down. In the corner of the room where she had been sitting quietly since the meeting began, Diane Warren had not spoken once. She had arrived with Cole that morning without invitation, had simply appeared beside him in the lobby, and Patricia had allowed it because Patricia had known Diane would be there and had decided it was better that she hear everything directly than secondhand. Now Diane sat with her hands in her lap and her wide-framed glasses slightly low on her nose, and her face doing something complicated that moved between disbelief and calculation, and something that was underneath both of those things, the beginning of fear. She opened her mouth. "I always knew," she said too loudly in the way people speak when they are trying to sound certain and are not certain at all. "I always knew Solomon was hiding something." Patricia looked at her. She did not respond immediately. She simply looked at Diane Warren with the patient, unhurried attention of a woman who has been waiting for exactly this sentence and is now making sure she's heard it correctly before she moves on. Then she made a small mark on her legal pad. Diane seemed to realize in the silence that followed that she had said something she should not have said. Her mouth closed. Her hands tightened in her lap. She looked at Cole, who was still looking at Tara, who was still looking at nothing in particular with her hands folded and her expression entirely composed. The mark on Patricia's legal pad was very small. It was also, as Diane Warren would come to understand in the weeks that followed, extremely significant. Cole sat in that room for 40 minutes after everyone else had left. Patricia had closed the meeting with the same professional efficiency with which she had opened it, thanked everyone for their time, indicated that formal documentation would be forthcoming, stood to signal that the session was concluded. Marcus had shaken Tara's hand with both of his and said something quiet that made her close her eyes briefly and nod. Derek Mills had left quickly with the energy of a man who has a great deal of phone calls to make. Diane had left without speaking to anyone. Tara had gathered her bag and put on her coat, her mother's coat, black wool, double-breasted, slightly too large across the shoulders, and walked to the door. At the threshold she had paused, not to look back, just to pause, the way you pause at the end of something long, giving it its full moment before you step through into whatever comes next. Then she had stepped through. Cole had not moved. He sat at the conference table with his water glass in front of him, and the business card Marcus had placed on the table, and the open file Patricia had left behind, the one with the asset schedule, the one with the number in it, and he sat there while the room went quiet around him, and the morning moved on outside the tall windows, and the Atlanta skyline did what it always did, indifferent and continuous and entirely unmoved. 40 minutes, nobody came back for him. The thing about collapse is that it is rarely dramatic. People expect drama. They expect the moment of reckoning to arrive with noise, with raised voices and slammed doors, and the kind of visible cinematic unraveling that announces itself clearly so that everyone in the vicinity knows exactly what they are witnessing. They expect the villain to rage, to fight, to go down swinging in some way that at least confirms he understood the magnitude of what happened to him. But real collapse is quieter than that. Real collapse looks like a man who stops returning calls, who arrives at his office one morning to find that his keycard no longer works and his assistant will not meet his eyes, who sits in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before driving away without going inside, who does not rage or fight or slam doors but simply diminishes, becomes less, contracts quietly into the smaller life that was always waiting for him on the other side of the one he had constructed. Cole Warren's collapse took 11 days. Tara watched none of it. The pharmaceutical company moved first. It was a Thursday 6 days after the meeting at Patricia's office when Cole received the call from his division head. A brief call. Professional. The kind of call that has been prepared by legal and approved by HR and delivered with the particular careful neutrality of an institution protecting itself. The company was restructuring the regional sales division. Cole's position was being eliminated. There was a severance package. There was an NDA. There was a deadline for returning his company laptop and phone. Cole had worked at the company for 7 years. The call lasted 4 minutes. He had known it was coming, had known it the way you know. Weather is coming when the sky has been doing something particular for days, but knowing had not made it arrive any more gently. He sat in his home office afterward with the phone still in his hand and the silence of the house around him, and the particular quality of a Tuesday afternoon that has suddenly become unscheduled, unstructured entirely without the framework that had given it shape. He called Derek Mills. Derek's assistant told him Derek was in a meeting. Derek did not call back that day. Vanessa disappeared on a Saturday. Not dramatically. Not with a confrontation or an explanation or even a conversation that might have given the ending some kind of shape. She simply stopped. The texts went unanswered. The calls went to voicemail. The private social media account went dark, the one where she had posted the champagne video, the one Patricia had accessed and downloaded and archived before any of this had begun to move. Cole drove to her apartment on a Sunday afternoon. He rang the buzzer 3 times. No answer. He called her phone standing on the sidewalk outside her building. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, and the voicemail was full. He stood on the sidewalk for a while. A couple walked past him with a dog. A delivery driver on a bicycle navigated around him without looking up. The city moved around him the way it always moved, continuous, indifferent, entirely unaware that he was standing in the middle of it, with the particular expression of a man who is only now beginning to understand the full dimensions of what he has lost. He drove home. The house that was not his, had never been his, that he had listed and contracted and celebrated with champagne in a kitchen that belonged to a trust he had never known existed, was quiet when he got back. Empty. His things were still there, but Tara's were not, or rather Tara's were reduced. Some things gone, others remaining the particular geography of a shared space that has become a half space, the visible evidence of a person in the process of leaving. He stood in the kitchen for a long time, then he went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. Diane Warren called her sister on a Wednesday. Her sister lived in Charlotte, and they spoke every Sunday as a rule, a habit of 30 years reliable and unvarying, but Diane called on a Wednesday, which her sister registered immediately as significant, and the call lasted 2 hours and covered in the fragmented, recursive way of conversations that are really about one thing, while appearing to be about many things, the full landscape of what had happened. Diane's sister listened carefully. When Diane had finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Diane, did you know about this woman, about what she had?" "Of course not," Diane said too quickly. Another silence. "Because what you said in that room," her sister said carefully, "about always knowing Solomon was hiding something that sounds like—" "I misspoke," Diane said. "I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly." Her sister did not press it. She was a kind woman, and she loved her sister, and she understood that there are moments when the most generous thing you can do for someone is not to follow a thing all the way to its conclusion. But she did not, after that call, bring up Cole's name again. And on Sunday, she did not call. Diane sat by her phone from 10 o'clock in the morning. Her sister did not call. She called 2 other friends that week, women she had known for years, women who had sat at her table and laughed at her jokes and accepted her assessments of other people with the comfortable deference of a long social arrangement. Neither of them called back within the day. One sent a text that evening, "So sorry, crazy week. Talk soon." The other did not respond at all. Diane Warren was 63 years old and had spent most of those years being the kind of woman who defined herself by her proximity to other people's opinions of her. She had cultivated those opinions carefully, had maintained them with the particular attentiveness of someone who understood at some unexamined level that without them she was not sure what she was. She sat in her living room on a Thursday evening with the good dishes still in the cabinet and the wine rack still full, and the table set for one, and understood without quite being able to say it aloud that the social architecture she had spent decades constructing had developed a crack she was not sure she knew how to repair. She did not call Cole. Cole did not call her. The sale contract on the house was officially voided on a Friday. Derek Mills sent the notification by email, a brief professional message copied to Patricia's office, confirming that the purchase and sale agreement for 1847 Wyndham Drive had been withdrawn following discovery of title issues that precluded completion of the transaction. The buyers had been notified. The earnest money had been returned. The listing had been taken down. Cole read the email at his kitchen table. He read it twice. Then he closed his laptop and sat in the kitchen of a house he did not own, with no job to go to and no attorney returning his calls, and no one in the particular silence of a Tuesday morning who was going to come and explain to him how to make the next thing happen. He had reached for everything, and everything had dissolved the moment he reached for it. Marcus called Tara on a Thursday afternoon. She was in her new office, the one that had been Solomon's, the corner office on the 14th floor of the Graham Diamond Holdings headquarters in Midtown Atlanta, the one with the view of the skyline she had been looking at from Patricia's building for 11 years and was now looking at from a different angle, closer from a room that was hers. She had not redecorated. She had moved Solomon's things carefully, the books, the reading glasses he had left in the top drawer, the coffee mug that was always half full and always cold, and she had placed her own things alongside them without replacing anything. It felt right that way, like a conversation continuing rather than ending. "Have you seen the news?" Marcus said when she answered. "Which part?" "The part where Graham Diamond Holdings just closed the Nairobi acquisition." A pause. "Front page of the business section." Tara looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "I saw it. Dad would have loved that one." "He knew about it," Tara said. "He started the negotiation 4 years ago. I just finished it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had the particular quality it got when he was feeling something he did not quite have the words for, warm and slightly rough at the edges, the way their father's voice had sometimes gotten at the end of a long day. "You doing okay, sis?" She thought about the question, gave it the time it deserved. Outside, the Atlanta skyline held its position against the pale December sky, steady, continuous, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in the offices and apartments and parking garages below it, indifferent to Cole Warren sitting in a kitchen that was not his, and Diane Warren sitting at a table set for one, and Vanessa Holt wherever she had gone, the world moving forward with the particular unhurried certainty of something that has never needed anyone's permission to continue. "Yeah," Tara said. "I think I really am." She heard Marcus exhale, not quite a laugh. Something quieter and more private than a laugh. "Good," he said. "That's good." After she hung up, she sat for a moment with her hands resting on Solomon's desk, her desk now, and looked at the skyline and thought about 11 years. About the dinners and the laundry, and the mornings she had woken up in a house that had never quite felt like hers, and gone through the motions of a life that had never quite fit. About the letter in her coat pocket, and the cemetery parking lot, and the way the ground had felt that November morning when she had read her father's handwriting and understood for the first time fully what he had given her. Not the money, not the company, not the $3.1 billion that now moved through accounts and portfolios, and acquisition negotiations with her name on every document that mattered. He had given her time to see clearly, time to be certain, time to let the people around her reveal themselves completely without interference, without the distortion that money introduces into every relationship it touches, without the possibility that anything anyone did toward her was done because of what she had rather than who she was. 11 years. She picked up the photograph Marcus had given her 3 weeks ago. Solomon and a young Tara standing in the first mine, squinting against the light, her father's hand on her shoulder. both of them looking at something outside the frame of the picture with expressions that were not quite smiling, but were something better than smiling, something steadier. She set it on the corner of the desk where she could see it from her chair. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work. Everything he had reached for had dissolved the moment he reached for it, and Tara had simply stood still. December came quietly, the kind of December that arrives without announcement. No dramatic cold snap, no sudden shift, just a gradual dimming of the light and a thinning of the air and the particular quality of morning that tells you without saying anything directly that the year is nearly done. Atlanta in December had its own texture, not the deep winter of other cities, not snow and silence, but something softer and more ambiguous, as though the season itself were still making up its mind. Tara noticed it on a Tuesday. She was driving to work to the office she was still adjusting to calling it that, still caught sometimes between the two lives she had lived simultaneously for so long, and she stopped at a red light on Peachtree and looked out the window at a row of trees that had gone bare overnight, their branches clean and angular against the pale morning sky, and she thought December. And then she thought, I made it. Not triumphantly, not with the particular heat of a person who has been waiting to arrive somewhere and has finally arrived, just quietly, the way you think a thing that is simply true. She had made it. The office had become hers, in the way that spaces become yours, not through ownership, which had been established in documents long before she sat down in the chair, but through the daily accumulation of presence. The coffee she made each morning in the small kitchen down the hall. The particular way the afternoon light came through the corner window and moved across the desk between 2 and 4 o'clock. The sound of Marcus's footsteps in the corridor unhurried, and even so much like their father's that she had looked up the first 3 times she heard them before she learned not to. She had kept Solomon's things where they were. The books on the shelf behind the desk, mineralogy texts, a worn copy of a biography. She did not recognize a dictionary with a broken spine that had clearly been consulted many times over many years. The reading glasses in the top drawer. The coffee mug which she had washed once and placed back on the corner of the desk and had not moved since. She had added her own things gradually. A small plant on the windowsill, a pothos nearly impossible to kill, chosen deliberately. A framed photograph of her mother that she had kept in a box for years, because there had been no wall in the house on Wyndham Drive where it had felt right to hang it. A blue ceramic bowl that had sat on the counter of her childhood home, and that Marcus had saved when Solomon's house was cleared and had given to her without explanation, knowing she would understand. She understood. On a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into December, she found the drawer. She had been looking for a stapler, a mundane errand, the kind of small domestic searching that fills the gaps between larger things, and she had opened the bottom drawer of Solomon's desk for the first time since she had moved in the deep drawer on the left side that she had assumed contained files or office supplies or the accumulated miscellany of a man's working life. It contained one thing, a photograph. She picked it up and held it in both hands and looked at it for a long time. It was old, the color slightly faded, the edges soft with handling. Solomon and Tara. She was perhaps 5 or 6 years old, small enough that the top of her head came only to his elbow. They were standing in what she recognized after a moment as the first mine, the one in Georgia, the one Solomon had told her about in his careful, unhurried voice on the night he had explained everything. Red clay earth beneath their feet, open sky above. Solomon's hand on her shoulder, large and steady and entirely certain. They were both looking at something outside the frame, something she could not see, something that existed only in the world beyond the edges of the photograph in the space that the camera had not captured, in whatever it was that had made her father's expression exactly what it was, not quite smiling, not quite serious, but something in between that she had no clean word for and had been looking for a word for her entire life. She sat with the photograph in both hands for a long time. Outside the corner window, the Atlanta skyline held its position against the December sky, steady, unhurried, doing what it had always done and would continue to do long after every person currently looking at it had stopped looking. The light was moving across the desk in that particular way. It moved between 2 and 4 slow and golden and slightly sideways, the way afternoon light moves in December when the sun is low and the shadows are long. She thought about her father, not the trust or the documents or the $3.1 billion that now moved through accounts with her name on every line, not the mine or the company or the 11 years of careful preparation. She thought about him the way you think about someone when the business of their absence has finally settled, and what remains is just them, just the person, the man who had kept a lamp burning past midnight and a coffee mug half full and cold, the man who had asked Cole Warren 3 questions over dinner and said nothing for the length of a red light and then turned to his daughter and told her the truth. the man who had loved her since before she had a name. She set the photograph on the corner of the desk next to the mug where she could see it from her chair. Then she sat back and looked at it for a moment, the 5-year-old Tara, and the Solomon she had known, and the sky above them, and the red clay earth, and whatever it was they had both been looking at beyond the frame. She thought she understood now what it was. Not a specific thing, not a destination or an achievement or a number on a document, just forward. They had both been looking forward. Into the open space of what was still possible, what was still unwritten, what existed beyond the edge of what the camera could see. Her father had spent his life looking there. Now she was looking there too. Marcus knocked on the open door at 4:15. He leaned in the doorway the way he always leaned one shoulder against the frame, unhurried, giving her the option of the conversation or not, without making it a thing either way. He saw the photograph on the desk. He did not say anything about it. He just looked at it for a moment, and something moved across his face that was private and complete, and then he looked at her. "Board call in 20, he said. "I know," she said. "I'll be there." He nodded, started to push off the door frame. "Marcus!" He paused. She looked at him across the desk, her brother 29 years old, broad shoulders, warm brown eyes, their father's posture and their father's stillness, and something that was entirely his own, underneath both of those things. "Thank you," she said, "for the bowl, and for everything else." He looked at her for a moment. "Dad asked me to," he said. "A long time ago." A pause. "But I would have anyway." He pushed off the door frame and his footsteps moved away down the corridor, unhurried and even, and Tara sat in the quiet of the corner office and listened to them go. She stayed late that evening, not because there was work that required it. There was always work, there would always be work. The particular infinity of a company of that size meant that the work was not something you finished, but something you moved through, but because she was not ready to leave. Because the office in the late evening had a quality she had not expected, and had come to value the building quieting around her floor by floor, the city outside the window shifting from day to afternoon to the particular amber and gray of Atlanta at dusk, the sense of being held inside something large and solid and entirely her own. She made herself a cup of tea in the small kitchen down the hall. She brought it back to the desk. She sat in Solomon's chair, her chair with both hands wrapped around the mug, and looked out the window at the city going dark and thought about nothing in particular. Let her mind rest. Let it move where it wanted to move without directing it, without requiring it to arrive anywhere. It moved to the cemetery, to the parking lot, to the letter in her coat pocket and her father's handwriting, and the sentence she had read so many times in the weeks since that she could close her eyes and see it in the precise slant of his pen. The quiet ones always win. She had thought when she first read it that he meant something strategic, that it was advice about how to move through the specific situation she was in. Stay quiet, don't react, let the work happen invisibly, and let the results speak when they needed to speak. And it was that. But sitting in the corner office in the December dark with her hands around a warm mug and the photograph of the two of them on the corner of the desk, she understood that it was also something else, something larger than strategy, something that had less to do with winning a specific thing and more to do with the kind of person you became when you learned to be still inside your own life. When you stopped performing for the people around you and stopped shrinking for the people who needed you small and stopped waiting for someone else to confirm what you already knew about yourself. Quiet was not the absence of strength. Quiet was what strength looked like when it had nothing to prove. Her father had known that. She knew it now. She finished her tea. She rinsed the mug in the small kitchen sink and placed it on the drying rack. She went back to the office and put on her coat. Her mother's coat, black wool, double-breasted, slightly too large across the shoulders, the coat she had worn to the funeral and to the dinner and to the meeting where everything had changed, and buttoned it and picked up her bag. She paused at the door and looked back at the office. The photograph on the corner of the desk, the mug beside it, the plant on the windowsill, the December sky outside the tall windows dark now and full of the particular clarity that comes after the light has gone and the city settles into itself. "I've got it from here, Daddy," she thought. She turned off the light. She walked down the corridor and into the elevator and through the lobby and out into the December night, and the city was cold and bright and continuous around her, and she walked to her car with her hands in her coat pockets and her chin level and her footsteps steady on the pavement, and she did not hurry, and she did not look back, and she was in a way that had nothing to do with money and nothing to do with victory and everything to do with the quiet accumulated weight of knowing exactly who you are, entirely, completely, and for the first time in a very long time, free. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand to be seen or require anyone else's recognition to be real. It is quiet and steady and entirely its own, built in the small hours, sustained in the silent moments passed down. Not in words, but in the way a father stands at a window past midnight, and a daughter watches from the doorway and understands without being told what she is seeing. Tara Graham had known who she was before Cole Warren had ever spoken her name. She had simply waited for the world to catch up. If you have stayed with this story until the end, and I believe you have, because you are exactly the kind of person who stays, then I want to say something directly to you. Not about Tara, not about Cole or Diane or the $3.1 billion, or the document that was worth exactly nothing. About you. There is a version of quiet that the world teaches us to be ashamed of. The quiet of a person who does not argue back, who does not make a scene, who absorbs things and continues and does not let the damage show on the surface. The world looks at that quiet and calls it weakness, calls it passivity, calls it not having enough fight. But there is another kind of quiet. The kind that is not the absence of strength, but the fullest expression of it. The kind that comes from knowing, really knowing, in the place beneath words, who you are and what you are worth and what you are building, even when no one around you can see it yet. Solomon Graham knew that quiet. He built $3.1 billion with it, and he gave it to his daughter not as an inheritance, but as a lesson. Not here is what I made, but here is how I made it. Here is what it looks like to move through the world without needing the world to confirm you. Here is what it looks like to love someone enough to let them see clearly even when the seeing is hard. Here is what it looks like to play a long game not because you are patient by nature, but because you understand that the things worth building cannot be rushed. You may be in the quiet right now. You may be in the part of the story where the people around you do not see you clearly, where you are being underestimated, overlooked, written off as a placeholder in someone else's plan, where the work you are doing is invisible and the ground you are preparing is known only to you. Stay in it. Do not rush. Do not react. Do not explain yourself to people who have already decided they know what you are. Just build, because the quiet ones always win. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it reached something real, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And come back next time, because we are just getting started.